Kirby Star Allies. I was incredibly hyped for this game. Considering the most phenomenal games of 2017 were the Switch debuts of two other iconic Nintendo IPs, I assumed Star Allies would follow suit in being one of the best Kirby games to date. Unfortunately, I was incredibly underwhelmed by it, completing the entire main story, extras and all, in only a few hours. Kirby games are notorious for having short-lengthed main stories, but I was expecting a bit more from the new one on Nintendo's latest and greatest console. Instead, Star Allies is a couple hours shorter than its predecessor Kirby Planet Robobot. The game is split into 4 separate worlds, but instead of them all containing the same stale amount of levels, the stage count progressively increases with each new world. I think this format was definitely more creative than how Robobot and most other Kirbys are structured, but Star Allies would have really benefited from a theoretical 5th world with another 20 to 22 levels to at least catch up to Robobot's length. I probably wouldn't be as upset with the length if the game weren't also incredibly weak in terms of substance. Star Allies was played very safely, taking a gigantic step back from all the creativities found in its predecessor. Planet Robobot had so many unique mechanics and designs ultimately come out of 2 core concepts: the foreground-background design and the Robobot mech. The use of foreground and background layers expanded level depth in RBB, having you jump between and interact with the 2 planes to progress through levels, solve puzzles, or avoid obstacles. HAL took advantage of this design to create an impressively large variety in environmental set pieces that also act as hazards. There were enemies in the background firing projectiles, the cars driving across the street, the billiard balls rolling from the back of the table, the giant dice, the lasers, the sharks, the music springs, the deadly floor tiles, the Tetris blocks. So many unique ideas in Robobot, all based on the use of foreground-background level design, and I haven't even named all of them. Robobot also had a bunch of unique items that coincided with this foreground-background design and were used for many of the game's puzzles. The battery which Kirby could pick up could be used to charge machines that would saw open pathways or switch items inside transporting pods. The remote controller allowed Kirby to control a mini robot sitting on the opposite plane by mirroring Kirby's movement. And the 3D laser bar, reused from Kirby Triple Deluxe, let Kirby attack objects and enemies on the opposite plane. The second concept Robobot utilized a ton was the new robot mech that Kirby could ride. In addition to being able to interact with objects like screws, bolts, and giant blocks, as well as destroy many of the game's normally impervious obstacles, the mech could also gain copy abilities exactly like Kirby. Pretty much every one of these copy abilities were used for unique puzzles, like keeping a snowman head frozen with the ice ability, or pushing around cement trucks with the stone ability. A decent half of Robobot ended up being opportunities for Kirby to ride the robot mech, with most levels having dedicated portions where it can be used. Some levels were even dedicated entirely to certain copy abilities, like the jet armor, which changed the level into a shoot-'em-up, or the wheel armor, which made the level long and track-like for Kirby to race through. This variety of abilities and uses for the Robobot mech prevented it from becoming a gimmicky concept, and instead, it was a very significant and fun part of Robobot's overall gameplay. Star Allies blatantly drops all of this, going back to the bare bones of Kirby concepts. Pretty much all of the game's puzzles utilize switches, doors and keys, or copy abilities. The puzzles that require ability combinations to solve were fun, but they were all incredibly samey compared to the variety found in Robobot. Most of Star Allies' puzzles play out exactly the same, handing the solution to you on a silver platter, quite literally, in an isolated room where what needs to be done is incredibly straightforward. and usually the CPU can solve it for you too. There are a few times where you actually need to be conscious about keeping a certain copy ability or ally, but very rarely is the solution to a puzzle a missed opportunity, since you can just reset most of them by re-entering the room. Remember those memory puzzles in Robobot where you had to memorize a certain pattern given on screen that led you to follow the correct path to the treasure? Yeah, Star Allies has something similar to that. There's just no stakes to it, because the solution doesn't need to be memorized. It's given to you right in front of the forked path. To be honest, a lot of Star Allies puzzles don't have any stakes to them. In Robobot, there were two major collectibles, code cubes and stickers. Code cubes needed to be found in order to fight each world's boss and open up each world's bonus level, while the stickers were merely a collectathon element for an in-game sticker book. Star Allies only brings back stickers in the form of puzzle pieces scattered throughout the game, along with one giant puzzle piece hidden in each level. Collected pieces are used to create pictures based on Kirby's previous adventures, and if you want to complete them, you need to find all the giant pieces since they fill in specific spaces on each picture. The issue with this is that it's still entirely optional to complete these pictures. Just like finding the stickers, finding the puzzle pieces doesn't impact anything in the main game, making the task of collecting them worthless to those not interested in the bonus pictures, which makes the majority of the game's puzzles worthless to those uninterested players, since almost every reward in a puzzle room is puzzle pieces. In place of finding all the code cubes to unlock an extra level, certain stages in Star Allies will hide a giant switch that opens a nearby bonus level when pressed. While it is cool to see the giant switches from Superstar return, it's unfortunate that Star Allies didn't keep a collectible that pertains to the game's progression. If collecting a small number of the big puzzle pieces unlocked access to each world's final stage, it would have been more engaging and encouraging to find them. The bigger issue, however, is definitely the difference in quantity between code cubes and big puzzle pieces plus giant switches. Comparing RBB's 3 code cubes per level equating to 3 significant puzzles per level, to SA's big puzzle piece equating to 1 significant puzzle per level, and the occasional secret path leading to the unlock of a bonus level, it really exposes how the puzzle content in each level of Star Allies is severely lacking when put up against Robobots. It's not just the puzzles in Star Allies either, the game's level design is incredibly generic. Aside from a few new elemental objects and unique hazards, the rest of the game's obstacles and items boil down to the familiar Kirby standards. There's a lot of flat, straightforward paths in Star Allies, and when there are obstacles present, nothing brand new is even used that often. The most common obstacle in the game is just a wave of enemies, which leaves the game feeling bland and uninspired in comparison to Robobot, with all its creative elements and hazards that constantly keep levels feeling fresh. The last thing I'd like to touch on is the friend actions, which can best be likened to the Robobot mech sections. All of these are great creative sections of the game, but much like the new obstacles and hazards, the friend actions are so few and far between that you don't really get enough time to enjoy using them. There's only one friend train section in the entire main story. Why did they even bother including it if it was just going to be used for one level? If there were more chances to use the friend actions, like how using the Robobot mech was such a common opportunity, they could have done some really clever things with them. Instead, you only get surface level implementations with a few glimpses into the potential behind these concepts. One particular surprise that I enjoyed was being able to fight a boss while riding the Friend Star. It was a creative fight, and I was happy to see that they expanded on the Friend Star concept by having it be used in battle. More situations like this, and Star Allies could have been a much stronger game. So there you have it. Kirby Star Allies has a supremely underwhelming story mode that's short in length with very little substance to its levels, and compared to its predecessor is especially disappointing. That's not to say that all aspects of Star Allies are bad, however. In fact, one of the game's biggest improvements might be a possible explanation for why it was played so safe. To contrast the game's poor content, Star Allies is hands down one of the best looking Kirby games ever, due to having HD visuals, which is a first for the main series. The game's levels and environments, while generic and uninspired design-wise, still look positively gorgeous with amazing detail and lighting, and the only limitation being a frame rate of 30 FPS during gameplay. While I didn't find it to be that much of a problem, what can be gleaned from the game's frame rate is that HAL probably spent the most amount of time and effort on the visuals when developing Star Allies. If they were willing to sacrifice 60 FPS, a standard generally found across the rest of the series, they clearly wanted it to be the best looking Kirby game you've ever seen, as opposed to toning the visuals down to achieve a better frame rate. Because it was the first HD Kirby, and the first Nintendo Switch Kirby no less, pretty much all of its assets likely had to be made from scratch. Robobot, aside from being a game developed for a much lower resolution, also had the advantage of being able to reuse assets already built from its console prequel Kirby Triple Deluxe. A benefit Star Allies could not take advantage of since it had no prequel to borrow from. It's entirely possible that HAL had a lot of ideas for Star Allies, but the demand for focus on visual resources resulted in cutting or rushing a lot of them. I was ultimately let down by how safe and generic Star Allies ended up being with its mechanics and levels, but I'm doubtful that HAL just straight up went creatively bankrupt for this game, especially with how much personality and creativity can be found in Robobot, which released only a couple years earlier. A priority on visuals detracting away from the game's other aspects is at least a plausible explanation, and if it truly is the case, a sequel to Star Allies is much more likely to have better level design and mechanics, since HAL will have more experience developing for the Switch and will also have art assets from Star Allies to borrow from, meaning a lot less of their time on a future project will require attention on the visuals. I was super excited for Kirby to make his debut on the Switch, but after playing it, well, overall I'd say, if you're a Kirby fan and enjoy the usual Kirby post-game content, it's still worth getting. But if you were hoping for the main game to improve and expand on everything that made Robobot so great, it'd probably be better for you to just replay Robobot. But hey, that's just my perspective.